Hello, F2 Fan 5000 here with driver ratings for the first round of the Japanese Super Formula Championship at Motegi. And for the first round, there's been a lot of surprises thrown up. It's been very good to see some drivers and teams that have been struggling to come forward and do a good job. So we're going to go through it now. A lot of the underdogs have done a great job here. People that are under pressure, that have struggled in the last couple of years, they've come good this weekend. There's a couple of disasters, like disappointing stories as well. So we'll get into it. So Ayumu Iwasa gets a 7 out of 10. His qualifying in the first race was excellent, and he's just had a little moment coming out. He's just had a moment when the safety car ended and was overtaken, so that's quite disappointing. He finished second in that race. He's qualified a decent third for the second race. In the race, I think it's a bit difficult to overtake at this circuit. Not impossible, but unless you have the OTS at the right time, the overtake button, the push to pass as it is, if you have that at the right time, then you can get the overtake done. But he was stuck behind Zach O'Sullivan with no way past. And Zach O'Sullivan was stuck behind Toshiki Oyu, who had destroyed his tyres. So it's a 7 out of 10 for Iwasa's weekend. I think it's a good starting point for a title defence, but he's definitely not at his best this weekend. His teammate Tomoki Najiri gets a 5. Although he qualified both races in the top 10, he's had an issue that wasn't really his fault in the second race when the big points are handed out. He also had a poor start, and that's put him back in the field. That's why he's more likely, when you're back in the pack, you're more likely to have these issues. And yeah, the first race was very straightforward. Most of it's under the safety car. So he gets a 5 out of 10. Luke Browning, what a way to start your life in Super Formula, Luke Browning. A 10 out of 10. What a fantastic result. Struggled in the qualifying sessions. Was last or somewhere at the back on the grid, and his race pace was sensational. He just stayed up the front, overcut everyone to finish a fantastic 4th place. When, halfway through the race, commentator Jake Sanson, he said, I don't think that Kondo or Nakajima are going to score any points. Well, Luke Browning proved him wrong. That was a sensational drive up front. Yeah, fantastic first weekend for Luke Browning. He'll be very pleased, and that'll impress Toyota no end, I'm sure. His teammate Okyo Sasahara, on the other hand, gets a 4 out of 10. Experienced driver, but he's had to come back from, the indignity of being dropped for a year. So I'll give him a little bit of a better leeway, but I think that's a disappointing weekend, and he's generally slower than his Rocky teammate. And Tadasuke Makino, the teammate of the winner, he gets a 3 out of 10. He was nowhere to be seen when your teammate's winning both races and you're scrapping outside the top 10. That's really a bad look. Where did he finish in the first race? No, neither race he finished in the top 10. 0 points. Unbelievably poor. No pace all weekend. Not good enough from Tadasuke Makino. But Kakenoshin Ota, he gets a 10 out of 10. He was fantastic. I think it was an opportunistic move that got him the win in the first race, but in the second race he clearly was the fastest driver out there. So he deserves a 10 out of 10. No mistakes, clinical, maximised every opportunity. And he's in a dominant position now where other drivers such as Iwasa are playing catch up in the Drivers' Championship. Kamui Kobayashi gets a 5. The veteran had a poor weekend. In fact, the team that he's driving for had a poor weekend all around, but I think he's qualified well, and then there's a mistake somewhere in the race. Yeah, whatever it is, it's very disappointing weekend for Kamui Kobayashi. And his teammate Rikuto Kobayashi gets a 3 out of 10. He's reasonable in the first race, but in the second race he's gone off all by himself, caused a safety car. So it's not a nice way to start for his first full-time season, you know. But anyway, he can bounce back from that. And Kenta Yamashita gets a 9 out of 10. Qualified well, and he's got points. Oh yeah, he overtook Yuma Iwasa on the last lap. That's a fantastic when you think that O'Sullivan couldn't overtake Toshiki Oyu, and you think that Iwasa couldn't take O'Sullivan, but somehow Kenta Yamashita overtook Iwasa on the last lap. Yeah, that has to mean something. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for Yamashita. And then Sayata Nanaka, the driver that has been given a second chance in Super Formula, had a tough weekend. I'll give him a 4 out of 10. He would be a bit disappointed considering a lot of the other young rookie stars really impressed this weekend, and he was sort of missing in action by comparison. You know, but there might be more to come from Sayata Nanaka. And then we get Juju Noda, and she gets I'm going to give her a 3 out of 10. I thought that was one of the less impressive weekends from Juju Noda for a while. Made some mistakes here and there, and was generally pretty slow, I have to say. I mean, that's been a feature of her all the time she's been in Super Formula, but last year I felt she made strides forward, and this weekend it looks as though she didn't go forward. She's gone backwards compared to last year. And Shun Koide gets a 9 out of 10. What a fantastic turnaround. A driver that's been struggled to hold his position a driver that struggled to keep his position on the grid, and he's qualified with the small team both times in the top 10, and he's come away with 2 points finishes. A fantastic way to bounce back from disappointment, and lucky to stay in the Super Formula, and just he's delivered when his back's been against the wall. And Nairo Fukuzumi gets a 10. This is the first podium for the team. I think they're called Rookie Racing, and they've been there a while. They've struggled, and now they've got a podium. Obviously, just like Luke Browning, he's been helped by the lack of pace of Toshiki Oyu, but still, yeah, fantastic result for Nairo Fukuzumi. Obviously, the drivers that did the overcut did a really good job. They've had to maintain their tyres from the beginning of the race, keep going faster, which what all three of them did. Browning, Sakaguchi, and Fukuzumi. So fantastic race. And Zach O'Sullivan gets an 8 out of 10. Where was Team Impel before? Now he's fighting at the front. It's a little bit. It's a bit hard because, he didn't overtake Toshiki Oyu, and maybe you could argue that's disappointing, so maybe he deserves a 7 instead. So I'll go 7.5 for Zach O'Sullivan. But, you have to think about where this team, this Impul team have been. They've been right at the back. They were right at the back with Juju Noda last year. I think they finished behind a couple of times, and now he's fighting at the front. Fantastic from Zach O'Sullivan. I think the race is slightly disappointing not to overtake Tashiki Oyu, but it's a bit hard at this circuit to pull off the overtake, and he's, had no the push to pass, the OTS as it was. He hasn't have any of that left at the end. And then Nobuharu Matsushita. Oh, he's driving for a team called the Lightworks, which have just made the step up from Super Lights to Super Formula. And in their first race, he's got a point for them. So that's a fantastic result for Matsushita. Lots of great performances there this weekend. Pleasing for the driver that, has sort of been, his career has been hanging in the balance for so long. But amongst all the great performances, the worst performance for me is Sho Saboi, the 2024 Drivers' Champion, and he gets a 0 out of 10. On the back foot all weekend, he's been shown up by his less experienced teammate, although obviously Sasha Fenestraz is very competent at this level, but Sho Saboi was very slow, especially in the second race. And for someone that's a recent champion, that's a very disappointing race indeed. Very disappointing in qualifying as well. No pace in the race. I've got to give him a 0. Sasha Fenestraz gets a 5 out of 10. He's been quite... Sasha Fenestraz has been very competitive last year. And in this race, he's a little bit... I have to say overall that Sasha Fenestraz is a little bit disappointing this weekend. Just a little bit slower than I would expect. Obviously disappointing in with the issue with the tyre, whether it's suspension or it's... I don't know, but it's very disappointing, and I'm sure they'll bounce back, the Toms team, though. And Senna Sakaguchi gets a 9 out of 10, a fantastic race. Second, he was fast when he needed to be fast. He overcut his teammate. Remember, he didn't stop as late as Browning or Fukuzumi, so he had less chance to do the overcut, but he's been rapid. He came out of the pits ahead of his teammate. One of his best drives since I've been watching Super Formula, so fantastic for Sakaguchi. And Tashiki Oyu gets a 7. Poor qualifying in the first race. In the second race, he's driven very well in the first half, and then he's burnt his tyres up after his pit stop, become a moving roadblock, basically. He defended very well from Zach O'Sullivan. But when you reflect that his teammate finished second in the race, it's a bit disappointing for Oyu, who I think has a lot of untapped potential. And Yuto Nomura, wow, that's a fantastic start to life in Super Formula. Qualified really high up in the first race, and then in the second race has been, even though he hasn't scored points, he's looked quick. I think that bodes well for his future. He would have turned heads for sure. So fantastic start to life for the reigning Super Lights champion. And Charlie Wirtz gets a 4 out of 10. He's fairly anonymous. I hardly noticed that he was there. A long way behind the likes of Nomura. Ren Sato gets a 7 out of 10. A fantastic qualifying for him in the first race, which was converted to a podium. In the second race, he hasn't scored points. though he was on the cusp of points. And he's just generally had the edge over his teammate. And coming to Igor Fraga, I'll give him a 3 out of 10. He was decent in the qualifying for the first race, but in the second race, he's had that mistake. He's whacked into the side of Tomoki Najiri and caused damage to his car and basically ruined his race. So, disappointing for Fraga. He can bounce back. He was very impressive last year. And finally, Roman Stanek gets a 7. Points on debut for Stanek. Again, a lot of new drivers coming in and being very impressive. A lot of impressive drives out there, or drivers that have flown under the radar, like Kenta Yamashita, Shun Koide, Nobahara Matsushita, and Roman Stanek's another one. Just under the radar, but looked fast. Scored points in the first race. In the second race, he's been a bit like it's stuck at the back because of contact on the first lap. But he was toe-to-toe with Tomoki Najiri the whole race from that point onwards. He's like right there battling with him. To me, in terms of his race pace and his qualifying pace, Roman Stanek is already there in Super Formula, making a very good impression. So that's a very exciting weekend done with, although the first race is quite disappointing because it's mostly under safety car, and the second race is, once the overtake was used up, it's very hard to make any passes. So hopefully at Autopolis we get, and it's good to see some of these underrated underdogs doing well, people that have, been overlooked, to like Shun Koide, to see them doing well, to see rookies come in and be fast in the off, to see struggling teams like Delight Works, Rookie Racing, Impul to get back near the front. So, hopefully we get more of that, but hopefully the front runners all, we want everyone, the best drivers fighting at the front. And can anyone catch Kakunoshin Otta? That's the big question.